Welcome! In this series of videos, we will look at software that complements the PowerBasic Windows and console compilers. Today, we will look at the SmartGit application to allow you to version manage your applications. Today, we're going to be looking at a version management system. There is already a video in the introduction series on version management. I'll put the link in the description below and you can select it from here. We're specifically going to be looking at an application called SmartGit. SmartGit is a client application to allow you to access Git repositories. Git is a version management system created by Linus Torvald. The name may be familiar to you, as Linus Torvald also created an operating system called Linux. To get to grips with Git on your desktop, all you need do is to download the SmartGit installation. There are options for Windows, Mac OS, and also Linux. Today we're going to be installing the Windows version on a Windows 11 machine. Now that we have downloaded SmartGit, we're going to install it on this machine. To install, there is a simple setup.exe. You can then select the destination folder into which you want SmartGit installed. When installing the SmartGit client, it not only installs the client, it also installs Git itself. So you do not have to download Git separately. And that's SmartGit installed. Now we have to go through the setup. We're going to take the basic defaults for SmartGit when we do this installation. SmartGit is quite configurable, therefore there are a number of different settings we can actually use here. At the moment I'm just going to use the log graph option. This can be changed later in the SmartGit client should you so wish. The next stage is to either add an existing local or create a new repository, or to clone an existing repository. We're going to be covering in a later video the ability of SmartGit to link into GitHub. GitHub and several other types of remote repository are websites. These websites can actually store your versioned code, and you can use this as a remote backup. But today we're just going to add an existing local or create a new repository option. And we're going to create a new repository on our C drive. So our Git repository is going to be stored inside a folder called Git repository. And we can now initialize this. And there is our initialization succeeded. We now have on screen our SmartGit client. So what we'll do to demonstrate how this can be used to allow you to version manage your code, we're going to create some code within that Git repository. We're going to create a local folder in which our source code is going to sit. We now have a number of source files copied into this folder. So if we go back to SmartGit, we'll see that SmartGit has quite rightly identified that we have a number of new files. These files are currently untracked by Git. We can see the content of each of these files by simply clicking on them, and it's displayed down at the bottom of the screen. Now that we've identified which files have actually been added to our project, we can right-click on all the files and click on Commit. The Commit Local or Stage Changes screen allows you to commit all of these files into the Git repository as our first revision. We can then put a commit message in as a piece of text to identify what it is we're putting in. And we can click the Commit button. These files have now been added, and the master branch is showing what we put in as our comment, first revision. And the initials of the person doing the commit appear on the right-hand side along with the date and time. If we then go in and make some changes to our source files, so we will comment out the first line of code, we will save, and we will recompile. And our new exe has now been generated. If we now go back to SmartGit, it is showing you that we now have 3 modified files and 1 untracked file. The untracked file is the backup that PowerBasic has created of our file. The basic file has changed, the log file has changed, and the executable has changed. As you will see at the bottom of the screen, if we look at the code file, it identifies which lines have actually changed, and it hides the ones that have not. If we look at the log file, we'll see what it's telling us that have actually changed since the last time the file was accessed. We can commit these changes by right-clicking and clicking Commit. We can then put a second message in and then commit. And we'll see we now have in our graph first revision and second revision. You can quite easily check what's been changed in each revision by clicking on it in the graph window. It tells you which files have been added and which files have been modified. If we go back to our source code and make a further change, and go back to our working tree, we now have 2 changes. If we click on the blockchain demo, it shows us the difference we have actually made. We can also look specifically at the log file for a particular file by right-clicking and clicking on Log. This brings a new window up on the screen, and this allows you to see the revisions of every change ever made to that file. When you have been using a particular application for some time and doing a great deal of development on it, you will have built up a revision history, and you can step back and look at what the code looked like at any point in time. If we check in these latest changes, and if we decide to go back and change something else in our source code, if we inadvertently delete a file and then go back to SmartGit, it will show it as missing. If this is deliberate, you can quite happily right-click and commit. However, if you have deleted a file inadvertently, you can then pick the discard option. Since this has not yet been committed, it's still sitting in the version history. If we click discard and then click the middle button, the discard button, it will restore that file to what it was last in the revision history. So if we go back to our folder, we'll see that the source code has now reappeared, exactly as it was before. As with all version management systems, once a revision has been committed into the history, it can no longer be changed. You can commit and add a new revision of a file, but you cannot amend a revision that has already been committed. This is quite deliberate, as it allows you to go back in time and select the content of a file as it existed at the time. As you will see from the top of the screen, this is an evaluation version, which will allow you to evaluate the application for 30 days. The SmartGit website also has additional information to tell you more about the SmartGit system. There are manuals and features and a community to which you can actually ask questions. The purchase cost of this application depends on how you're going to be using it. You can be billed monthly or yearly. You can also take advantage of the single payment subscription, either for 1, 2 or 3 years or a lifetime license. There is also an option for non-commercial licenses. SmartGit can be used free of charge by open source developers, employees and students of public academic institutions, and employees of public charities. And there is a link to apply for a non-commercial license. The license is also user-based and not machine-based, so each user can use their license on any number of machines. This can be different physical or virtual machines. This has been a very brief introduction to the SmartGit application. We'll cover more in the next video, but that's it for today. Thank you for watching.